There is a very big difference between having an opinion
and having a bias.
It's vlog time. You're blocking the vlog. Mwah. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and the other day I made a video where I humorously called out Legal Eagle on what I perceived to be a bias in his interpretation of the whistleblower scandal that has rocked the Trump White House. When someone does a legal breakdown of the whistleblower complaint against Donald Trump
and goes into incredible detail, yet fails to mention the small detail that Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, was receiving $50,000 a month for being a board member of the energy company that was at the heart of the Ukrainian corruption scandal.
I'm sorry, Legal Eagle, welcome to Political Biasville.
Population U.
Now, first of all, a lot of it was tongue-in-cheek, sort of humorous, just a way to interact with another YouTube lawyer, although I do genuinely believe that he has some political bias that does make its way through in his interpretations of political events. That being said, someone having a political bias doesn't necessarily make them wrong, and it doesn't mean that you have nothing to learn from them. And indeed, I learned something from each and every one of Legal Eagle's videos that I watch. Now, for those of you who haven't seen my video where I address Legal Eagle's bias in his interpretation of the whistleblower, and where I do my own breakdown and analysis of the whistleblower complaint itself, I'll link it right here. And this is where we go to Legal Eagle's analysis, which reeks of bias for the following reasons, and let me just play you a clip from his video.
This is bad. I don't see a other side to this. This is on par, if not worse, than what was uncovered in the 1974 Watergate scandal. I don't see a second side to this.
But more important than watching the video first, if you haven't already watched it, go read the comments. Go read the comments. You know what? Before you even read the comments, I almost forgot the most important thing. This Saturday night, 9 o'clock Montreal time, Eastern Standard Time, I'm doing a live stream with Nate Brody. And for those of you who don't know who Nate Brody is, he's another US attorney, and he actually called me out on my video where I broke down and analyzed the Washington Post's motion to dismiss Nicholas Sandmann's lawsuit. So apparently there's another YouTube lawyer out there, and he wants to call me out on my analysis of the Nicholas Sandmann judgment?
And one of my favorite YouTubers, Viva Frei, did some great videos about the case, but I'm going to tell you something. His analysis was wrong.
What kind of YouTube lawyer calls out another YouTube lawyer? Well, Nate Brody, if that is your real name, let me tell you something. You can't call me out.
'Cause I'm calling you out.
And we ended up getting into an amazing internet back and forth where I made a response video to his response video, and we have since become friends, which is actually totally amazing. So this Saturday night, we're going to be doing a live stream. I suspect we're going to talk a little bit about the whistleblower and the recent developments, breaking it down for everyone to understand. Stay tuned for that update. I'll send the link around when it's ready, and let's get back to this video, I guess. And a lot of people in the comment section are accusing me of having my own bias. And I am neurotically self-aware and continually question myself as to whether or not I have a bias on a subject that is influencing the manner in which I digest, interpret, and subsequently explain that particular subject matter. And I ultimately think it's one of two things. Either I don't have a bias, or I do have a bias, but I am so neurotically self-aware of that bias that I overcompensate for that bias in the interpretation of the adverse position, in which case I don't have a bias. Alright, last parentheses of this video, I promise. The quote that I used at the end of the video, I did not know that that quote existed when I first started this video. And for your general information, what I do is I make the video. When I get to the end, I go to brainyquotes.com and I look for a quote relating to the subject matter of the video. And when I found this one, it was amazing, mind-blowing. It's exactly what I was feeling, except for the first half of the quote, which I feel might make people think that I am arrogant, conceited, or whatever. And I was going to cut the first half of the quote out only to include the second half of the quote, which is the substance of the quote, but I didn't want to modify or bastardize or otherwise edit the original quote, so I included it as is. But please don't judge me, I did not include it as is in order to make myself feel or look smarter or whatever. I'm not conceited, I don't like looking conceited, and I don't want people out there thinking I'm including this quote to make myself seem smarter or more important. You'll know what I mean when you get to the quote and read it, but at least now you know my intentions. Let's get back to the video, and last interruption, I promise. See what I did there? But I do think that a lot of people improperly confound having an opinion with having a bias. And while having a bias can affect one's opinion, having an opinion does not necessarily mean that one has a bias. An opinion is a conclusion that one draws from a set of facts. A bias is the perspective through which they gather those facts. A bias is a perspective. They are blinders. They are the way in which someone sees the world, which can in turn and probably necessarily will impact or influence their opinions. And I bring this back to the practice of law. Good lawyers will have a position. They will not have a bias. And what do I mean by that? I'm not going to reduce this to a game of semantics, but it is nonetheless useful to look at the actual definition of bias. Hey Siri, what's the definition of bias?
As a noun, it means inclination or prejudice for or against one person or group, especially in a way considered to be unfair. Be unfair.
Be unfair.
Do you want to hear the next one?
Yes, please.
As a noun, it means a direction diagonal to the weave of a fabric.
That one was totally irrelevant. An inclination or prejudice for or against another person or group, especially in a way to be considered unfair. And it is the unfair aspect of bias that is its defining characteristic. Bias is when someone treats two sets of facts, two individuals, two groups, differently based on their own prejudice. A prejudice which incidentally can be either for or against that person. And that's where political bias comes into play. And bringing it back to the practice of law, it's not because an attorney has a position that they have a bias. In fact, if they treat the opposing position in an unfair manner, if they don't do it justice in describing it to the judge, if they don't do it justice in trying to understand it and respond to it, they may in fact suffer from a bias, and they will in fact not be able to do their job as properly as if they just defend their position in and of itself in an unbiased manner. And how does bias typically materialize itself? Well, typically you have a bias by act or omission, ignoring the bad stuff and focusing on the good stuff. Or if it's someone you have a prejudice against, ignoring the good stuff and focusing on the bad stuff. A bias in the practice of law would be to the effect of building strawman arguments for your adversaries. That type of trickery will only get you so far. When you get in front of a judge, and if a judge does not feel that you are presenting your adversary's position fairly and accurately in an unbiased manner, the judge is not going to like you very much. Presenting your adversary's position in an inaccurate and biased manner will compromise your own standing with the judge in front of the judge. Here's a shocker. I have opinions. I have strong opinions. And a lot of people confound having an opinion with having a bias, and I tend to think that's something of a Freudian projection, where they may be projecting their own inner feelings of bias as relates to their own opinions on the opinions of other people. But I am a philosophizer and not a psychologizer, and that is my philosophizing on my perception of Freudian projection, which itself may be projection. I'm well aware of that, and I do ask myself those questions every day of the week. And bringing it back to the fact that, shocker, I have opinions, and I have strong opinions. And I am aware of my strong opinions when tackling certain subjects. And for those of you who haven't seen my vlog on the Mike Ward decision, I'll link it right here. A Quebec Human Rights Tribunal ordered Mike Ward to pay damages in the order of $42,000 to Jeremy Gabriel and his mother for jokes Mike Ward made at the expense of Jeremy and his mother. And for those of you who don't know, Jeremy Gabriel is a Quebec column public figure, was a singer, he was born with Treacher-Collins syndrome, so he suffers from certain facial deformities and deafness. Mike Ward made a series of jokes which were, albeit entirely tasteless, at the expense of Jeremy Gabriel and his mother, and Jeremy filed a complaint with the Quebec Human Rights Tribunal, and the court rendered a decision in favor of Jeremy and his mother to the effect that his human rights had been violated by Mike Ward and his bit on Jeremy Gabriel. Now, I have an opinion on that. I strongly disagree with the judgment, and I'm waiting for the Court of Appeal to come down with this decision so I can see whether or not the Court of Appeal overturns this decision of the Quebec Human Rights Tribunal. That being said, I have an opinion. I don't consider that to be a bias. I don't consider that to be a bias because I went out of my way to properly and fairly describe a position with which I disagree. And the fact that I disagree with it does not mean that I don't understand it. I entirely understand the decision, I just entirely disagree with the decision. But I still think the decision is extremely well drafted and might make for a hard decision to overturn by the Court of Appeal. If I were to indeed have a bias, I think it would manifest itself in an unfair or superficial or a strawman characterization of the position with which I disagree. And another perfect example of having an opinion versus having a bias. Somebody can be totally pro-gay rights, pro-gay marriage, and nonetheless understand and accurately explain the adverse position. Having an opinion is saying this is what I believe, and I can fairly describe what the opposing side believes as well. Having a bias is saying I believe in equal rights in gay marriage, and anyone who doesn't is a homophobe and a bigot. Having an unbiased opinion would require someone to actually accurately and fairly summarize the opposing position. Why might someone oppose gay marriage? Because it's a biblical thing and they believe very strongly in the Bible and that a marriage should be between a man and a woman. Why else might someone oppose gay marriage? Because by definition, marriage is supposed to be between a man and a woman, and they don't want to change the meanings of words, so call it civil union, call it whatever you want, but they don't want to call it marriage. Agree or disagree with it, that is the position properly described. It's far different than saying I believe in equal rights, gay marriage, and anyone who doesn't is a bigot or a homophobe. So that's that. Do I have a bias? I don't think so. But if I do have a bias, I think I make an active effort to understand and accurately summarize the position with which I disagree, in which case I sort of counteracted my bias, so I don't have a bias. And yes, I appreciate that I might be saying this with a bias towards my own opinion. How is that for like next level 4D self-analysis? And it all comes back to the same thing. The most important thing for any lawyer to do is to sincerely, genuinely, and fairly understand the adverse position, explain it, present it, and then counter it. Now, if you like this video and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Growth has been very slow on YouTube these days, and I have my sneaking suspicions why, but that might be my own bias to how I think I'm being treated by YouTube. Either way, help me grow the channel by sharing it, and if you want some merch, I will post a link to the merch in the comment section below, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!